Alright, welcome to Brightworks. Today we are working on a 1988 Cabriolet, and the top will not go up and down. We had the controller rebuilt. It had failed a bench test, and there's something else going on. So at this point we're going to go through and clean out this transmission. This is the driver's side. Now, rule number one, don't ever take this bolt out. I'll show you what happens when you take that bolt out. But when it goes back and forth like that, it means that the gear that's inside here has just kind of jumped off its track. So we'll get that side disassembled and show you what it looks like. Alright, so this is not a job for the faint of heart or anyone who can't handle a little grease. Lots of little tiny parts, but this thing's 30 years old, so it's going to have some nastiness inside of it. So as we pull this backing plate off, you'll see there's a really cool gear, a little bit of steampunk in Porsche here, but this gear is not attached to the rest of the transmission anymore. So what has to happen now is this has to come apart, and then slide this guy in there, put it back together, and hopefully we'll clean it up, put some fresh grease on it, and that should fix the transmission. I'll show you how we test that using nothing more than a drill. But we're trying to prove all the parts are okay and find out what real part is bad, because the list price on these things approaches the thousands of dollars each. So we're trying to make sure that the part we replace is actually the part that's broken. So a little bit more effort goes into the troubleshooting, but we're going to troubleshoot it and see if we can figure it out. The other thing is that bolt that I said not to take off, or this crank not to take it off at this end, not at this end, because there is a little clip and washer down there that go on the end of that bolt. So when we assemble it back together, we'll put that all back on and get this guy clocked up correctly. Alright, so as I said, not for the faint of heart. We've got all kinds of little gears and grime and stuff going on in here. This is kind of cool. It's a little planetary style gear. So lots of parts, pieces, and actually, sorry about the hand, but you can see how all that grease has just really gotten nasty, and it's done its job. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean all this stuff up, and then we're going to go ahead and put some fresh grease in there and make sure that this little guy works. So we'll get it cleaned up, come back and show you what we found. Alright, we got the big gear cleaned up. The other little gears are sitting on Sonia, still getting cleaned. What you can see is these things are clocked. So you see this wide spot here, this wide spot here. So the only way this guy can actually go on there is like that. So put a couple of the little bushings back on, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to slide this guy right in here. It's tough to do with one hand. Imagine trying to do it with two. So that guy's going to go through there, and then we'll spin it around. So that guy went in there. Now we'll spin it around so that what'll happen is once everybody else gets out of the cleaner, it'll plug in here, and we'll be able to clock these any way we want. So let's go find the other parts. Alright, if you look way down in there, you can see that little clip and that little washer are now back on the drive shaft. That is definitely not one of the most fun jobs on the planet. Makes putting piston wrist pins in look easy. But we are now ready to put the rest of it together. Alright, so everything's been cleaned up. now we have two working theories. I found this little piece of a bolt, which I think came off of this bolt, inside of the whole thing. That's what kind of forced me to clean everything really, really well. So I don't see any chips on gear teeth or anything like that. So as of right now, I don't think that little bolt is the reason that the customer stated it made a grinding noise and stopped working. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to use plain old white lithium grease. Nothing fancy. I was considering using some synthetic grease, but this doesn't get hot. So white lithium grease will be just perfect. We don't want to put too much in, but put enough to at least keep it interesting. Since I washed everything, and I want to make sure that we have no corrosion concerns whatsoever, because ideally this little guy should run. He ran for almost 30 years this time. Hopefully he'll run for another 30 years. Alright, so a little bit of, I'm hearing a little bit of noise on the outside there. So a little grease up here, here. Make sure that all the mating surfaces have plenty of grease on them. So we got that guy pretty well covered. We can always go back and use a paper towel to take it off. So I'm not worried about that. Alright, that's looking good so far. Now we'll take it and we will drop it into this guy here. Alright, I hear a little bit of noise there, so pull it back out. Put a little bit of white lithium grease around this edge here, because you can see there's a little bit of wear. But a little bit of wear after 30 years, not a big deal. Okay. Drop that guy back in there. Oh, that feels very, very smooth. I'm pretty happy with that. Put a little bit on the edges. Perfect. Okay. Now, we're going to also put some on this drive gear. This is a cool little planetary. I guess it's really a torque reduction gear or a torque multiplication strategy that they have going on there. There's a little bushing down in the bottom, so it's going to get a little grease. So we'll take these before we put this in. Make sure we put some grease on each one of those teeth that are in there. Okay, now we have plenty of grease. So we will drop this little guy right in there, maybe. Alright, we got our hole pattern. That matches up. Oh, gotta have that thing all the way down. And get the teeth to line up. Perfect. Okay, so now our hole pattern is lined up. We are in pretty good shape there. Next thing we'll do is we'll take our drive cable, and we've cleaned that, so we're just going to go back and add a little bit of white lithium grease to it. Once we have this guy sealed up and run him a little bit, we'll make sure that we wipe off all of the excess. Alright. Now there's a tiny little bush that you can kind of see it on the end of my finger here, but it fits in there because it ends up riding against the face of that pot metal housing. So we'll stick it in the little pot metal housing there. First I thought it was a magnet, and then I realized no, it's not a magnet. It's just a little bush to make sure that if this pin pushes too far in or out, that it doesn't go against the metal. All right, so now we've got that guy in there. We didn't mess with any of these adjustments, so our theory is we put it back together the exact same way that we found it, and we didn't move anything that should cause any of the dimensions to change. Okay, so I'm gonna tighten that down, put these little spacers in, a couple things like that, and once I finish that, I'll show you how we test it. All right, now you can see I got this thing chucked up in a drill. It's going to make some noise, so you're welcome to turn the volume down for this point. If everything works the way it should, this should move. When we fire up the drill, we're spinning the drive cable, and that should spin this gear, and then that little planetary, we should see this guy start to move around. So let's see what happens. So a little sound warning here. All right, so it worked in one direction. Let's make sure it works in the opposite direction. Like a champ. So what I'll do now is I'll get this buttoned up, wipe all that grease off. I'll use the drill to make sure that I clock this arm at the same place that I have the arm clocked for the other one. So that way we're starting out from similar positions. But I still have a feeling that the motors are bad, and that's what's causing the problem, because there is nothing really in this transmission that would lead you to believe something was bad. Yes, it was dirty, yes, it was gunked up, but I could still spin the drive cable with my fingers, just turning it, and I could get this guy to move. So typically what will happen is you can't turn that drive cable, and it'll just chunk up. But again, these are not cheap pieces to replace, and you can see by the quality they don't build them like this anymore. But what's cool is this is the same methodology that Porsche used from the G body, which is I forget what year the first convertible came out, but definitely the 80s. This is an 88. And the part numbers all cross all the way through to a 993. So very similar setup, and just taking it apart, cleaning it up, put it back together, and this part we know works. So now what we have to get is we have to get those drive motors to spin, just like this drill was doing, because I'm pretty sure the customer doesn't want to ride around with a drill in the car, although that could be an option, depending upon what else is broken. Maybe a hand drill is the way to go. All right, we're going to button this up and wish us luck that this is it. We will talk to you soon for the next project. Visit us at www.brightworks.com. Thank you.